Good morning. Good morning. It's Spill the Tea Tuesday. It's Teresa here today with you, and I have my very special friend, Christy Guziak, who is a traveler with passion for adventure, living life to the fullest. She is always traveling, but she also takes pride in running several businesses, running the gamut from corporate to recruiting to Reiki and travel. She loves animals and would love to have an animal sanctuary one day. Which is a perfect segue. Welcome, Christy. Yes, she is the animal lover. How many animals do you have, Christy?
Okay, well, this morning alone in the house, we have, when we do the counts really quick, 4 cats and 3 dogs in here. So 7.
So if that doesn't scream animal lover to you, I'm not sure what will.
We stay busy. We got a few fosters in here. So if anyone wants a kitten, I got 2 of those. And yeah, I love them.
Yes, and Christy's located in Arizona. So if you need a cat and you're in Arizona, contact her. There, we got the plug.
I love it.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to kind of change up the day a little bit and get to start it this way in such a positive manner. And I've never done anything like this before, so it's really fun.
Well, thank you for being on my podcast. I mean, it's so funny. Everyone calls it a podcast, but it's not technically a podcast. But I've been considering changing it. But it's the live spill the tea.
I feel so cool that I'm on a podcast. So there you go.
There you go. It's whatever we want it to be.
Right.
So, Christy, let's talk about how we met for just a second. So, I ended up signing up with Danielle and doing Reiki level 2, and Christy was in my group of amazing women. That was, oh my gosh, our attunement was in May. Doesn't it feel like years ago already?
I was like just thinking of the time when you were starting to say that, and I'm like, I was thinking it's been at least a year or 2. I was thinking October, but it's because we have something special coming in October. That's probably why I'm thinking that will be a little bit more significant. But
I mean, it was just a few months ago, but it feels like it's been lifetimes.
It has, just another way.
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, lifetimes. How did you get into like the whole spiritual journey and Reiki and all of those types of things?
Yeah. So I guess the simple version is I grew up with it. So I was born into a family where that was really normal. Mom would be like, "Oh, grandma's here, grandpa's here," and they were not alive anymore. And they're just making a visit in the bathroom as we're getting ready for school or things like that. My mom used to talk to her friends who had passed away in the garden, and so I grew up with an environment that it was like very normal to talk about these things. My aunt actually has done, some work for the police departments, helping, with certain cases where people have been murdered and things like that in Arizona. So she's like very gifted and has an incredible way of being able to see things that other people can't. My grandma was big in this space in the sense of like, she would talk about, again, seeing people. So a lot of like medium gifts in the family, both my aunts, my mom. And then, as I grew up, it became a little weirder to talk about those things with people. And so it was like, more of a secret and whatnot. And then really, gosh, a few years, 5 years ago, it's been more than a few years, I went through a really bad heartbreak, and I worked with somebody who talked about Reiki. She was like, have you thought about trying that? I didn't really know what it was, but I had this like yearning desire to experience it. And I had no clue what it was. And so I just showed up to this session, like at this point, I'll take anything that can help me. And what I loved about it is it was so spiritual, and it came from like a place where we talked about Jesus and God, and like we also incorporated, intentions and manifestations and letting go of things from the past. And so it was like all these things I've always believed in and really resonated with that all came together in one. And I had this beautiful experience, but then life happened, and I'm 25 years old, just doing my thing, and kind of forgot about Reiki for a little bit. And so I think my angels were like, yeah, that's not happening. And so I moved to Arizona And again, life got a little bit difficult. It's always like these moments when life got a little bit difficult that it's like pushing me back to kind of, that place of spirit and in that fun little side of things. And so I actually found Danielle's business partner, Sam, and I did a sound bath, had a beautiful experience. And during that sound bath, I got a ping about, you need to revisit Reiki. And so I asked Sam, do you know anyone who does Reiki? And she said, yes, Danielle. And so that's how I found Danielle, jumped back into it. And then this go around, it was like, this is here to stay. This is for you. And it really just very quickly spiraled into me deciding to, want to learn more and incorporate her education into the practice. And now we've gone about 10 different directions of where you can go in this world, but it's been absolutely amazing.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. So really it was like life was happening and you were looking for a little bit of like solace, right? Like in a heartbreak. And so Reiki was introduced and then you kind of just like, okay, you got enough to get you going, right? And then it was like, it brought you right back.
Yeah. And I think it's like so cool that it's always been a part of me. It's been a part of my family. So I didn't have to have maybe like that spiritual come out that a lot of people have to have and be like, I'm woo woo. It was like a really kind of natural progression back to who I already was, where I came from, this family of powerful, amazing women. It was like I could kind of start talking about it with them. And it was nice because, as you know, and I'm sure other people who have had certain, experiences in this space, it's like you can't always just say the things that you experience and people say like, oh yeah, that's totally normal. There's some weird stuff. So it was really nice to be able to kind of speak about these things with people who didn't find it bizarre that I was having visions of me and my dog in a past life together. And I was a man looking at my hands. It's like, my mom's like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. So it was like really, it kind of just helped me ease back into things. And then finding you and our other friends through Reiki and Danielle, it was like, this go around, I had so much support around me that it was like, it made it easier to just lean into it and accept this coming. But yes, to go back to the question, it's like, it has always taken like hard events in my life or me feeling like really not aligned or like I'm not on my path or I'm making choices that don't feel like me. That's what's always put me back on the tracks.
So. Yeah. It's so interesting. I think that it's like kind of our inner knowing of like, okay, this is how we like, it's bringing us home. Right. Mm-hmm. And so getting off the path and then having to come back to it reminds us, that all the answers are really within us. And it's not just like within us, within our body. It's like truly a soul connection. Right. And I think that's where the woo woo starts coming in. People are like, what are you talking about? Or what is she smoking? But to that fact, like even in our introduction, it's like, I felt like I've known you for so long. And I think that especially from some of the adventures that you've gone on in the spiritual journey, you can actually speak to what that means. And I love how like now I've had resources and books to help explain that actually our souls do live on. Like it's almost like, which I know for people that don't believe in reincarnation, that's definitely like a hard thing to understand. But then it's like, but when, it's like when you meet someone that you feel like you've known for so long, and then you're like, oh, it's because it's a soul connection. We've lived together in previous lives. That's when we really get the weird looks.
For sure. And I can understand growing up. I mean, I grew up a baptized Catholic, grew up with family members who are super religious to this day. Like, they know all of the different songs in church and like, and then really kind of switched over to a more like non-denominational Christian background. And so I can understand the idea of reincarnation is tricky, especially depending on if you went to Bible school or went to a religious, school, things like that. And so I can understand that. And I'll just say, like, if anyone is interested in exploring more and like on the topic of books, the book, Many Lives, Many Masters, for me, I mean, reincarnation's been in my heart. I've known it my whole life because we'll backpedal here for a second.
Yeah.
My first really interesting spiritual experience that I can remember, and one that's been told over decades now, to people is, when I was probably 4 or 5, I'm falling asleep in bed next to my mom, and I used to get scared. I didn't like to sleep alone. And so she's like laying with me as I fall asleep, and just out of the blue, I was really in like a meditative state as a child. And I started telling my mom about this past life that we lived together. And I said, Mom, do you remember when we were sisters? And she's like, she knew because of her background in this world, she knew the type of questions to ask. What were we wearing? What were we doing? Things like that. And I said, oh, it's kind of like Little House on the Prairie, and there's the wagon and the horse. And I'm telling her our mom's name, our dad's name. I'm telling her about this life we lived together. And then I said something like, please don't ever leave me again, because like it was the saddest thing. And I was so scared to lose her. And I told her how she had passed away. She got in a wagon accident. She took the wagon out and the horse took off, and this whole thing. So I think because I experienced that at such a young age, and then that was also validated at a later time. My mom did a past life regression, like a hypnosis thing. And all the names I said were exactly what my mom heard and saw. Like, it was just, so for me, it was like, I didn't have to really bridge that gap with like religion and reincarnation. It was just, you can't make up the experience I had. Right.
Right.
With that being said, though, this book, Many Lives, Many Masters, I feel like it's a beautiful read for anyone who's like just interested and fully believes, doesn't believe, is teetering. Because I loved that it was so science-based. You have this doctor, Dr. Brian Weiss, right? And he's like, he's strong in his Jewish faith. He's, medically trained. And he's like, he's not someone who was even kind of teetering on believing that. So for me, I thought that was just a really beautiful book and an example for no matter where somebody's at with their beliefs, just a really, really nice thing. So I loved reading that and kind of.
I have to agree with you on that, because when I read it, I was like, oh, this just embodies the message so much more clearly for someone who is teetering to understand, because it's literally a doctor putting someone under hypnosis that's experiencing these past life regressions with their client in real time and documenting all of it, which is definitely not something people can make up. It's very interesting. It's really remarkable. It also makes me really wonder what else our human brain is holding on to and like capable of. And it's like the soul and brain connection and all of that is so. It's almost like the brain is the motor for the soul in this human form, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's like really interesting. I took a class with someone named Anna Hendricks, and she channels the Akashic records. And I took this whole course on the body, right? And it was really channeling the Akashic records and how our body came to be, what all the different functions are in our body. And so it's really interesting when you bring up the brain and the mind, and then you take the soul, right, and you put it in this physical form. And it was so interesting because actually the mind and the brain, what we learned, it's more of like a fear-based mechanism to protect us. Like our mind is really, the reason the mind was created in this physical body, according to the channeling she did of the Akashic records, is that it's to protect us from just like doing anything, right? It's like, we got to have this brain that says like, oh, maybe don't do that. But with that brain also comes like, sometimes it limits what we can actually do that wouldn't hurt us, if that makes sense. And so something I found really interesting was that the heart is actually the brain and mind of the soul.
Oh,
and
wow.
So to speak with your heart and to like tap into your heart, because that's more of the brain of the soul, where the mind is more the brain of the physical, if that makes sense. So, kind of an odd concept to think about, but it was really interesting to tap into that.
I love it.
So.
Okay. So you keep mentioning the Akashic records. What does that mean? What is that?
Yeah. So the Akashic records, I'm somewhat new to it as well. So bear with me. I'm learning as we go. But essentially, the Akashic records are really, it's a record of anything that has ever happened, is happening, and will happen. And you can have an Akashic record for yourself. If we opened your Akashic records, right? For me, you can open the Akashic records for a city, a state, a period of time, the body, right? There's so many different things that you can open the records for. And in my experience with them, it's each one has been different, but essentially you can open them and you ask questions. I mean, that's the best way to really like start to dive into the records. And so if you open them for yourself, it's just the first question I ever asked in my own records. And this was per the advice of Anna Hendricks. I did a course on how to open the records. It was just asking like which clair is the strongest. So whether that's clairsentience, clairvoyance, whatever it might be, right? And it was so wild because they told me it was actually that I hear, like I will hear and I would have thought, no way. I always thought this voice inside my head was my voice. So I'd always question, like, why are you thinking that? Why are you saying that? Where is this coming from? And I kind of got anxiety and got a little like, what is this? In the minute, I mean, I would never, if I was directing my records, I would have never said that my clair is like to hear things like the voice. And I would have picked everything else but that. And so it was really wild once they said that and I listened, and then they just started, and I was like, what is happening? I said, can you guys slow down, please? Like, I don't know. And I didn't know, it wasn't like it was my grandma speaking to me. It was like, I don't know who these beings were. They were angelic. They were safe. They were beautiful, but they just started talking. And so my experience with the Akashic records, it hasn't been like somebody I know that's passed, that's giving me information. It's not something familiar. It's like, it's the most safe, secure, beautiful space, but it's almost like just these beings that are part of the Akasha. And from my understanding, that is kind of how it goes. But it's interesting because it's very different than I would have thought. I would have thought it would have been a more familiar thing. And it's actually more just like spirits that are there to answer your questions and guide you and share what they can. So, and they're very relatable. It's really funny. It's like talking to you, how you might explain something to me. Like that's how they speak to you. It totally makes sense.
That's so interesting. It's really cool. But what would you say, like, what is the Akashic records? I mean, is that souls from other lifetimes that are like letting you know certain things about, like, what is the Akashic records?
So like the records themselves is like anything that has happened in past lives, this life, in time, for whoever or whatever you're opening it for. So when I, looked into mine, it could be past lives, like past lives. It could even be from other realms, other places. It could be this life or things that are going to happen potentially in this life. So it almost kind of crosses every area of like the spiritual realm of, a lot of times you'll see a medium, right? Or speak to somebody and they're telling you more about like your future. Oh, you're going to have this great career, or you're going to marry this person or have this many kids. It's like, it can tap into those things. They always tell you like things can change and people have free will. So it's not like if you open those and it says this is what's going to happen, that's a guaranteed thing. So I really like to use them personally for the past, and I've really had fun with the past lives. But you could go into, a lot of people will do inner child work with the Akashic records, really tap into what happened in childhood that makes them feel a certain way or be a certain way. So the records themselves is just literally a record of everything and anything that's ever existed on any planet, any realm, anywhere. The beings that are there, I don't know enough about it, but from my understanding, I think they're like actual like spiritual beings of the Akasha who it is their duty and job to, provide the information when they're being opened appropriately and being used, with permission.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I wonder, we put our own human words attached to any of it, right? So it's like it could be your guides, it could be angels, it could be other spiritual souls, who knows, right? But how
Exactly.
interesting, what like so intriguing. So what else have you learned from diving into Akashic records?
Yeah, it's interesting because what I've found is that, sometimes when you have an intention going in with them, that's not always what you come out with. And
Mm,
that's a beautiful thing in itself, because it's like a lot of times as humans, we think we know what we need and want, right, in any given moment. And so I've been pleasantly surprised with the few times they've been opened by me or by others, that they just say, we're going here instead. I had the intention of doing an inner child healing. It took me to my times in Atlantis. Um, I don't know why. It was, I guess, what I needed, right, in that exact moment. And so that's been a little bit funny or surprising, I guess, a surprising fact. Um, I think what's really cool for me, and this kind of goes back to where we started, right? Feeling like we've known each other forever when it's
yeah.
really only been like a shorter time. I've loved exploring my current life relationships, all different types, friends, romantic, family, animals. I've loved exploring those in the Akashic records to see where they originated, where they came from, how long we've been together, what it's all meant, because it's actually really helped heal a lot of things in this lifetime. And I don't want to go into like too much detail of certain things just for the sake of like not embarrassing people, but like I've had certain ex romantic relationships that like go back many lives, but it wasn't always like a good relationship, or there was things that happened that like kind of explained how I felt towards them in this lifetime from a romantic perspective, right?
That's
My
so
best friend,
intriguing. I want like even I mean I feel like that could be with family or friends too, right? Because it's like sometimes you're
exactly.
like, even if it's I'm going to use like just an example that came up recently with one of my other friends. It's like when we have these relationships that have like envy and jealousy as the underlying, and it's like, why? Like, there's nothing to be jealous about. There's nothing to envy. But it's like maybe it's something carried from a past life, right?
I think, I mean, what I always like to think of it, and this is a great question for everyone to ask themselves, right? Like, do you have this like certain feeling towards a person exactly like that? Whether it's like jealousy, or it's like you might just feel like they're going to stab you in the back, but you
Yeah.
love them as a person. They've never done anything to hurt you in this life. And you're like, why do I have this like ping to like keep my eye out for them? It can mean a lot of things, but I like to always kind of say, like, I bet there's something from another place in time here. Or for me, for example, I have a dog who like I have separation anxiety from. And I just like feel this thing in my heart, but I'm so afraid to lose her. And sure enough, when I went back in the Akashic records into one of my Atlantean lifetimes, it was like they were experimenting on her and they had created this like half breed animal. And I was like married to the scientist who was doing this. And I had this like intense connection with her. And I literally have this vision sometimes, and I saw this in the records of me being like ripped away from her
Oh.
and not being together. And so it's like this, what I'm feeling in this life has so much to do with that life. It's not anything that's happened in this life. And so understanding that, it like kind of how we say like what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. It's kind of like what's in that life is in that life, and what's in this life is in this life. But sometimes when you don't understand what's happened in so many different past lives with different people and animals and things, it can carry into this life, and you can't tell if it's like a thing from this place in time or another place in time. So I do feel that going and exploring past lives, whether it's through past life regression, hypnosis, opening the Akashic records yourself, or with the help of somebody who's trained to do so, I feel it can be so healing for your current lifetime and the relationships you have, because it just kind of explains why you are the way you are, why you feel the way you do. And once you can detach, like it's not this place and time, it's like, okay. And you kind of can just like let it be a blip on the radar versus this like thing that never happened in this life.
It's so interesting that you say that. I have so many questions just as far as my own life now because of it. Because even recently, like my mom was one of 11, she passed away. And I was recently with all her siblings, and there's this feeling of almost anxiety, but it's really like I keep calling it like this anxiety, like insecurity when I'm away from them, and so it's been hard because it's like, okay, when you're around your family it feels so good, but then it's like when you're not, you have that separation anxiety, and it's like, what is the explanation for that? And for me it's like, well, it's just my safety because it's family, right? But it's like, what makes me feel unsafe just because like we're still in this lifetime together, but it's like there's so much distance. It's really interesting to just think about it. And like it brings up questions that I have, as far as what is that relationship from past lives? What is that connection? Obviously, it's a super strong connection because I feel connected to them. But what does it all mean? So what an interesting thing to actually just ask. Now, I know just because you and I've talked personally, I'm going to bring it up. When you very first did the Akashic records, you had no idea that you actually go and ask questions. Like you expected it to be a reading. So
Mhm.
recently I was looking it up because I also was like, well, what is this all about? Like, I want to learn more about this for these exact reasons. And uh, it's like questions. Well, what if you don't know what to ask? What is a powerful question? What kind of questions? And I mean, I'm just glad that we're opening this conversation to talk about it a little.
Yeah.
Um, because how would we know, especially when you're from like more of a mediumship background yourself? It's like, oh, well, you're
Mhm.
given these messages and you're like, it's kind of like you're guided to where it needs to go. And it sounds like there's some of that with the Akashic records, but talk to me a little bit about these questions and like what are the types of questions that you feel like are powerful to ask and make the best use of your time in this experience?
Yeah, no, and it's interesting. You're so right. It's so different than like the mediumship thing in ways, because like when you want to know if you have a good medium, right, you don't say anything. They don't know anything about you, and you just kind of like let them start going, and then you kind of interpret as you go, right? And you have to figure
Yeah.
it out. What's so different is you're kind of laying your cards out on the table in the Akashic records, because it's what's important to you. What do you want to know? What do you feel is important? When I first went and I didn't know you had to have questions, I'm like, I love to be prepared. I'm operation mind. I'm like, oh no. Like I'm like sitting there, oh no, like what do I do? And so I guess, it was kind of a blessing because it was the best question that she suggested. I said, I didn't come prepared with questions. I don't even know what this really is. I don't even know what we're doing. I guess, can you kind of guide me a little bit? And she said, how about I tell you about what your records look like when I open them? And so I recommend to every single person, if you do a reading with somebody, I think that's the most beautiful question to ask, because it's kind of like the start of it all, right? Who's coming in? What's happening? Are they moving fast, slow? It kind of helps you understand a lot. And so when I said, okay, yeah, that would be amazing, she explained to me all the angels that were flying in. I see Archangel Michael, Raphael, Gabriel. I see Jesus. I see Sophia Christos. So it was for me my first introduction to my guides, like a confirmed introduction. I've always believed in these things, but I'm like, why have I always had such a strong connection to Archangel Michael? Well, now we know he's like one of my most important guides. So I really love that. You can kind of piggyback off that question and ask, like, who are your guides? I think it's so powerful to know who your guides are so that you can call on them and speak to them by name. I can't even tell you how powerful like my spiritual practice has like felt, being able to in prayer or in my self Reiki practice or when opening the records to say like, Archangel Michael, hello, I'm bringing you in, like to really invite them by name in. I think that's really cool. So asking what your records look like, who your spirit guides are, I think that's a great place to start. Again, for me, I've found in my life with the things I've dealt with and like where my struggles are, I've really enjoyed focusing on relationships. And when I say relationships, I mean any type of human or animal connection. So, for example, my dog recently passed away, and I had an Akashic record planned, reading planned prior to him passing that happened to fall after his passing. And we just had such a special connection. And I didn't know if there'd be something in the Akashic records, but I thought, let's just ask, right? And it was so cool because I got to go through so many lifetimes of Bear and I. And Bear is my dog, who passed, right? And so she opened the records when I asked about Bear and brought to the first time that him and I met, our first lifetime together. It was not what I expected at all, but it totally explained our relationship in this life. And I thought that was so cool, you know?
Yeah.
And then she took me through all these lives we had together. And so it was very healing after his passing. He also said he's coming back. That felt really nice to know. And it confirmed a lot. I asked about my best friend, Liz, because I keep like thinking she's my sister. I'm like, she's my sister. She's my sister. I'm sure they were going to tell me she's been my sister in so many lives. She's been my sister in one life, but we've always been like best friends, and we reincarnate she was like, I can't find a life you didn't reincarnate together.
Oh, wow.
We started to explain. So for me, I think my best advice, if you're going to open the records yourself or have someone do it, I always tell people to like tap into what's going on in their current life, right? Do you have a relationship with one of your parents that just, you have this like edge? For me, I've always had like a little bit of an edge towards like male authority or like aggressive behavior. And so I really wanted to tap into that in my first reading. So any kind of like phobias, weird things you feel that you don't really have a reason to feel them, people that you just love or people that you hate, you know, or something in between, special relationships, things you feel. I just think that's a really fun place to explore them because it just enhances all of that in this life. And the relationships that haven't been so good, being able to understand why they are that way and like what the purpose is in this life. It's like with one of my exes, I can just like let it go. I'm like, we had to heal that karmic bond from another time and place. And now we can put it to bed here. And like, I wish you nothing but the best, and same for me. And it just like, it's so much peace. So I know that doesn't really answer the question because it's really up to each individual of like how they feel. But I think a great place to start is to just take some quiet time, really tap into like how you feel about other people that are close to you or not, or like you have a weird fear of getting on a plane. I mean, these are all things, right? You're going to probably get to the root of it in the Akashic records.
I love that. I think that was actually very helpful because of course there's different things that we all want to uncover about ourselves personally, but just to even have a starting point from someone that has done a reading and has had that opened up for you, you know, I love that you've also been able to experience it with questions prepared and not prepared. So you kind of understand both sides of just what is going to come up, what am I going to see? And I guess the end of the real answer is no one really knows until you're in it, right?
Yeah, I would say whatever you think's going to happen, it's probably not what you think. Just how I thought my friend had to have been my sister because it's sister energy. But sister energy doesn't have to be a sister, like being called a sister. It's just somebody that you have like a really strong relationship with. And it was time that created that feeling of sisterhood for me. And so I think the most important thing in anything you do, whether it's Reiki, the Akashic records, your self meditation, it's being open to just whatever is meant to be will be, and to not place a judgment on it. It's like whatever's coming is coming because it's time and you're ready. You won't see anything or experience anything that you're not ready to handle or face.
Oh, I love that. I love that you said that as well, just because so many people sometimes carry fear around like, oh my gosh, what am I going to find out? What am I going to know? What am I going to see?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's kind of the nice part too, if you are open to letting someone else open the records and you find someone that you trust. And I've found some really wonderful practitioners who like make it a very safe, sacred, you know, can really influence, like bring religious influences in if it makes you feel comfortable, where they can see certain things that are tough to see and phrase it to you and explain it to you in a way that doesn't feel so daunting. Because I've been at times scared to see things with my own eyes or hear them for fear of not trusting, number one, into what might be there because of certain fears that I have or things that scare me. And so I think like walking through it with somebody else is a nice experience as well.
Yeah. So you've done a class for it. Now, is this something anyone can do for themselves? Like, how does that part of it work?
Yeah. I actually love this question. This has come up so much lately because I've had a lot of people and friends ask me like, well, you're so gifted. You have this power. I'm like, no, 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 no. I mean, yes, we're all gifted, right? But it's not just me that can open the Akashic records or tap into Reiki energy. It's like this lives within every single one of us. We all have the ability to do anything we want. We just have to say it's what we want and put, the time and effort and say like, okay, I'm open to it. That's really what it is. I'm open to it. And so anyone can do these things. I think it feels really nice when you have some guidance or a place to start to just learn because, it's like, how do you open the Akashic records? Like, what the heck, And so, I'll share, I actually have this on my desk, which is funny. I told you earlier, I was like, this book was on my desk today. And I was like, I think we're supposed to talk about this. And the person I learned how to open the Akashic records through, she learned how to open the records through this book. So it's How to Read the Akashic Records by Linda Howe. What's really beautiful about this is there's a prayer in here that's similar to, Teresa will understand, our Reiki invocation. When we call on the light, the earth, our angels, it's what gets the hands buzzing. It's kind of like our cue, like, okay, we're ready to work, ready to open the channel. It's the same with this. There's a little pathway prayer in here that, it's kind of the cue, like we're going to open Akashic records. And there's so many different prayers and versions of this, but this is a really great one. I was told for, beginners, and the person who I've done readings with, taken multiple classes with, she didn't know anything about the Akashic records, read this book, and it opened the floodgates. So I think just finding the resources that people feel comfortable with, but that's a good one if anyone's interested in, diving a little deeper and trying it for themselves to see what happens.
Yes, thank you so much for just even offering the information on the book. I'll make sure to put it in the notes and everything because I think that's also something in society today. Everyone thinks that they have to have a reading and they have to spend buku crazy dollars to try to have a reading. And it's like, actually, a lot of this is something like you said, we all have our own unique gifts and can tap into things. It's knowing how to and understanding. And so what a cool opportunity for us to do our own research and check it out. And then if there's really a pool to have someone else open them for us, then we can share that information too.
Absolutely. And it's just, it all lies within you. It's like, if you have the intention and want to explore, and you don't have to pay a lot of money to do it. It's like great if you have that opportunity and you want to. That's kind of how I got hooked. Somebody had told me about this amazing experience they had. I'm like, I would love to try it. Didn't really know what I was doing. It was so cool, right? But I love that somebody else that I learned from, she read the book. She was big corporate, boss, running all these things. She was religious, didn't see her life going in that direction. And now she is solely, doing classes, reading the records. That is her life, the Akashic records. And it all started with a book.
I love it.
I think that's like so cool, and something like, I just definitely want to reiterate what you said. It's like, anybody, you can find this information online. You can look up the Pathway Prayer by Linda Howe online if you don't even want to buy the book, right? It's like, we all have the opportunity to tap into any side of our spirituality that we want. And I think it just starts with like your intention to do so, your open mind to do so. And most importantly, taking what resonates with you and leaving what doesn't, because everything written out there, it's not going to sit with all of us the same way. And that's like unique to our soul. And that's kind of your little ping or like buzzer to be like, yeah, let's, Reiki kept coming up for me, and it was like calling me, and I was drawn to it. The Akashic records, same thing. There's other things I've heard and read, and I'm like, it's not for me, but it doesn't mean it's not real for somebody else. It's just not mine. So
I love it. Well, and I think that those pings that's how we know what is truly meant. Just like, even with the clairs and you saying like, am I really that great at hearing? Just curious, going back to that, what did you think what were you expecting to come up to be number one?
I didn't know. I thought maybe it would be, I thought maybe clairsentience, because I feel so much. And that's like, even when I think to every day, when I have visions or when anything else starts to come through, it's usually a feeling I get. So I would have been so sure that it was that. And it was clairaudience. They were like, bing, bing, bing. Like it was hilarious. And I would have put that at the absolute bottom because then I would have said, clairvoyant, because I do see sometimes. It's not always. It just comes when it comes. So I was really surprised. But once I knew, and I love that question, by the way, that's a great question. If you open your own records or someone else opens them, like what's your strongest clair? Because I think once you know that, you can trust it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee it's not what you think it is. And that's the funny part. I really thought I'm a talker. So I'm like, oh, it's my mind talking all day long. It's not. It's my angels. It's my guides. They're feeding me things all day. And now that I know them, it's like, oh, okay.
I'm really, really curious because I also I think that maybe my initial thought would be visions because I like more so see and it's like color and it's like kind of a knowing combined with vision, right? But it's not like I see just like the exact landscape per se. I see the things that are pertinent. But at the same time, I think about it and it's like when I feel like I'm channeling, it's coming through my voice. So it's like, are they talking? Is that audio? You know what I mean? So it's so interesting because there's so many times, even when I'm listening to other people and like, let's say that they're sharing something that's on their heart. In that moment, I tap into what I need to. And it's like, okay, you asked me a day or two later, like, hey, what was everybody thinking? And I'm like, I don't know. It's already gone.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I feel like it comes so quickly and you're not asking for it. And that's the part I love about like what we get to do. It's like there's no pressure that the vision comes or the voice comes or the feeling comes. It either just does or it doesn't. And that's exactly what it was supposed to be. And so because of that, I think it's really hard when we start using the brain, right? And like try to pinpoint did I hear it? Did I feel it? Did I see it? Did I sense it? How did it come? Because it's just there. And that's probably how you feel when these things come through. It's just there. And you either went there by touch, but it's like, did you hear it? Did you see it? Did you feel it? Was it a combination? And so I think that's why I would love to know what yours is as you tap into that, because I just think it's so funny because it just happens and you don't know where it's like, where did that come from?
Mm-hmm. Well, even when it's like, I might not think that I feel anything, but I blurt something out. And then later on, it's like, oh, well, the day that you said that, it affected me in this way, or it really helped because of this. And I'm like, I didn't even know.
Yeah. No, and that's what I can say. Like that was supposed to, I say things that I don't remember sometimes when I'm in a session and I'm like, I said that? Oh, I don't even. So I'm like, that was them. And if I don't remember, I'm not supposed to remember. And that's what I say. I used to get frustrated. I'm like, what was that? Or what came up? And it was like, no, that was just for that moment, for that person. If I said it and if I didn't say it, it was just for me to be able to do what I can do and utilize that information in that moment and then leave it there for that person. And so that's one other thing too, for anyone that, since we've talked about fear and like maybe people who aren't as like open to these things, it's like, I think I've heard from several people, it's like it's a little scary what I might see or know about them. Oh. It's like, if I'm not supposed to see or know, I won't. And if it's not something like your dirty laundry is not going to be aired out to somebody. And so I just like to share that because there's nothing to be afraid of when you let someone like work with you, assuming, it's somebody who has the right intentions and you feel that there's a good, match there with whoever you're doing this with. But nothing's going to be revealed that's going to out you or, and I felt like that needed to be said because I think when you see things, hear things, people get worried you're going to know too much, that they're not ready to let anybody know yet. And I don't think that's the case.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I think that it's really, really important also to just mention that everyone should feel completely aligned in sharing with the person that they are opening up with. If they don't, then it's a no-go, because not everybody is out there for good intentions. And so just be mindful and really trust your instincts on that. Because I think some people are also in positions to where they will take advantage of people just because just because there's people out there that will.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah. I've been caught up in that because I did grow up around mediums and all these things, and I've fallen trap to certain things. And if I would have just listened to my intuition, and it told me right away before working with somebody, it told me, and I just was like in a desperate spot and needed answers and was looking everywhere else but within, that I didn't care how I felt. And so I think that's so important, and like just tapping into like your feelings, whether you call that your intuition, whether it's a body feeling that you get, your stomach tells you yes, no, really listening to that and not feeling bad if it's saying no, because it doesn't mean someone's a bad person. It might just not be that person for you.
Right. I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for being here today and talking about all of this. I love hearing about your journey all the time. And I love the aha moments that you've had since I have known you in this lifetime. So keep sharing them. But thank you so much for just being on Spill the Tea today. Is there anything else you'd like to share with everyone?
No, I love this. This was so fun. And thank you for asking so many thoughtful questions and like being open to learning and hearing about other things besides, what it is that just you and I know about. So I hope it resonates with somebody out there. And if you feel the urge to just start poking around and exploring, do it.
Yes.
There's a reason it's calling you. So.
Yes, absolutely. And Christy, how can people find you if they have questions?
Oh, yes. Great question. I'm on all the things, but Instagram, the Gypsy Christy. I keep that like all things. You'll see animals, you'll see travel, you'll see the Reiki spiritual side. You'll see just the everyday, like I want to go have a good dinner with some friends. So absolutely anyone can reach out to me there.
Love it. Okay. And we'll make sure to tag you. And thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you.